And we'll start this morning with Tradition 9. A family or relationship should be pliable in its organization, but our group conscience may appoint certain persons responsible to serve various functions. Okay, an atmosphere of acceptance and freedom are wonderful in which to live. However, there is some daily work. It's like going to the meetings, If you just show up and then go away, there's a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes there. And the same thing true that I could be this way, true in a home. Growth is done individually, not as a unit, unfortunately, And everybody does it at their own pace. But when you're living together with someone else, you've got to come up with a set of mutually agreed upon guidelines for acceptable conduct, for your relationship, as well as responsibility for the items in day-to-day living. It just works better that way. And somehow or another, I got the idea that men do certain things and women do certain things. I think we sort of were raised like that in my generation, And there's certain things that men are supposed to do that I enjoy doing. There's other stuff I don't want to do, that kind of a deal. So we made up the guidelines first for the acceptable conduct. And these are ours. Yours will probably be different, but this is what we agreed on. And the first one was God is the head of our household. God is to have an active role in our home and the decisions made in the relationship. This was something we never even considered prior to coming into the program. It was like, it wasn't love at first sight. Sort of shock at first sight, being as how I had taken JD's brother home from a party at my house where he'd gotten drunk, and his brother was underage, and so I knew that he would probably get picked up by the law, tell him where he got booze, that would be Roger's speed, and then I would be in trouble for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So I drove this boy home, and he had a China tea set in his truck to give to his mother because it was around Mother's Day. And so it was in the wee hours of the morning, and I'm escorting a drunken 18-year-old kid into his home, and he flips the light on in his bedroom, and there's this man laying there with nothing but a pair of jockey shorts on, and he looks up and goes, "Well, hot damn, little brother, you brought us a broad home." Well, that was JD. And that was how we met. A little strange, isn't it? It seems strange and bizarre to me now, but it didn't at the time, because bizarre was an everyday way of life. Today I look at that and think, that is pretty strange, But, iceberg. Anyway. A little bit of something icy floating past, So it never occurred to us, to have any kind of healthy relationship. What made a healthy relationship? We didn't know. He had been divorced for a couple of years, and here I had been separated for a while, had forgot I was still married, and we got together. I mean, that was as simple as it was. I don't recommend that. That's not a very spiritual basis for a relationship, but that was how it was. And so that is our first guideline. And the second one in our home is no alcohol or drugs on the premises. Now, we're talking about the bad kind of drugs, Certainly you can have your prescription medication that is prescribed by your normal, sane doctor. If you're taking massive doses of something, you might want to look at that. But no matter, we found that there is no need for those things to be in our house anymore. The things that we used to do that weren't good for us. And then the next one was really important. It's called no infidelity. This was a major problem. It was a problem for me in my first relationship. I was happy, too joyous and free. I think you could have called it loose. And, but what goes around comes around. And, that's another thing. It's real important. Because I had done that, because I had been an adulteress, and because I had judged myself, when JD would be out drinking and he would take to the lower companion, I accepted that unacceptable behavior because I felt like, oh well, I deserved that because look what I had done. See, You have a tendency to accept things, when you don't feel good about yourself. And because I didn't, I accepted that. But we determined that our relationship wasn't going to go too far if we had that. So that was one of ours. Then we had, this next one has changed over the years. It started out, no expenditures over $50 without prior discussion and agreement. You can't even go out and eat hardly anymore, so we have had to up that, it's like a couple of $100. Don't get carried away and spend a lot of money that we are going to have to come up with at some point down the road. And in all honesty, I was the major offender of this rule. JD was not one to do that. He knew I'd kill him. And see, there's the thing. It was okay for me to do it, but it wasn't okay for JD to do it, because my judgment was so much better than JD's. So were my bills. They were so much higher than JD's. This next one is no obligations or commitments for each other without prior agreement. Now, this was a real difficult thing. I don't know why it was, but somebody would say, would y'all like to come over for dinner? And I'd say, sure. And then I'd go home and tell him where we were going to go at what time. And it never occurred to me that that was rude. I mean, we just went. And I said, well, what was I supposed to tell him? And my sponsor said you could say, I would love to come, but I need to check and see if JD's going to be available. Oh. Well, see, that never occurred to me. I thought that you just answered for one another, And so when I started doing it, but see, then what would happen is I would come home and I'd say, we're supposed to be over so-and-so's place at such and such a time, and he says, I don't want to go. Well, you have to go. Well, why do I have to go? Because I said you'd be there. Well, then you can just say I'm not being there, And then we would get in, and don't humiliate me, don't embarrass me. In other words, let me rob you of your choice, but I don't want to have to pay a consequence for it. That kind of a thing. And so I had to get over doing that. And what was so funny on that is, JD made the mistake one time of coming in and telling me that they were having a potluck over at the AA group and that he had signed me up for brownies. I said, you did what? He said, I told him you'd make brownies. I said, I said, no. You made a decision for me. You didn't say, I'll see if Mary Pearl will make brownies. It looks like you're going to make brownies, JD. And he said, I don't cook. I don't make brownies. I don't make anything. I said, well, then you're going to have to find a way to get brownies over there. And so he kept waiting, thinking, how I would always say I wasn't going to do something, and then how at the last minute, rather than to see it screwed up, you cave in, and so you go ahead and you do it, but you martyr about it, that kind of thing. Well, after all I did at the last minute for you. And I determined I wasn't going to do it. When you make these changes and you do something different, it's hard. And so JD said, well, what am I going to do? And I said, I don't know. And so he determined he would go to the store and get some brownie mix. And he came back, and the hardest thing was to let him alone in the kitchen with the brownie mix. Because I wanted to go in there and show him what pan, how to mix, the whole thing. It's like I didn't want to make them, but I didn't want him screwing up the kitchen either. One of those. But he made the brownies, and he was so proud, so he can add that to his repertoire of hot dogs, turnip greens, and brownies. I mean, you can see we're in for great food at our house. The next little guideline we have is personal privacy and quiet time. It's real important to have your own individual space. To be able to do, it's like, say, JD has a tendency to be talkative early in the morning. I'm not. I like to be quiet early in the morning. I'm not a good riser, I just don't like he does. And so, it's like I stay and be quiet, in the mornings. And so he can get up and do whatever he needs to. And then usually he's gone to work. Then I can get up and do what I need to do in the quiet. It's like I really don't want to hear conversation until I've been up for a couple hours. It's just hard for me. Then, special time for each other. And we call it date night. And we started off with one night a week. Now we have a couple, sometimes three, But it's time where we give each other our undivided attention. We don't have people over. We don't schedule check-in calls or anything like that. This is our time. And, we can let the machine take the calls. You don't have to worry about it. And spend time where you sit down and talk to one another. Do whatever you want to do. Have fun together. Just the two of you. And, it's real funny because for a while we didn't even know what to say to one another. Like, what do you do? This is because it was so foreign to us. And now we're really picky about our time together. We really enjoy that. Another guideline is that common courtesy. I like the please and I like the thank yous and I like those kind of things. I like the requests instead of demands. Those kind of things in the home. And the autonomous action is measured by its negative effect on our relationship. In other words, we're free to do what we want to do, providing it doesn't affect the relationship adversely. This one was a good one. No dredging up of past relationships or using the past as a weapon. So many times we have a tendency to go back and whap them with the past. It looks like a little hammer and just whap, 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 And we try not to dredge up the past because the past is gone. And it's like when something happens and, like for instance, if we got off to a bad start this morning, you don't have to carry it through the whole day long. You can say, okay, let's put that behind us now and let's move forward. In other words, let's not let that little incident ruin the rest of our good time together here. It's like I got started off on my trip to Vancouver. Boy, did I ever! With an upset stomach, and I was almost in the bathroom of the plane when we landed in Chicago. I was one of those. I ran, jumped in my seat, and the wheels touched down. And I thought, oh, don't tell me. And I'm going, no, I'm going to let this go. I'm not going to anticipate that we're going to have a rotten time just because I've got an upset stomach today. Because when I look forward to a rotten time, I usually have a rotten time. Those kind of things. We try to apply the rules of healthy communication as outlined in The Dilemma of the Alcoholic Marriage, one of my favorite pieces of Al-Anon literature. And if the IAs in here have not read it, you might ought to. It gives us 5 little guidelines here. And the first is discuss, don't attack. And usually I would get to the point I would get so angry about a series of items, that when I came time to talk, I pounced. You could tell it was the whole thing, we need to talk. Already, it's not good news. I can remember my mother calling me over and one morning and she said, we need to have a very serious talk. Get over here now. And hung up the phone. Intuitively, you're not going to like this. And I didn't. And fortunately, I had called my sponsor and told her about that command. And we prayed about it. But that was the day my mother had decided that I should not be here anymore and tried to do me in. So, those things is, don't attack people. Because when you attack people, they go on the defensive. And even if they want to do what you're suggesting, they won't. They'll resist that because you have pounced. Because then we go into this position. You go into that defensive position. And the second is talk in a low voice. This is very difficult for me. Thank you. Now, when I get very, very angry, or talk through gritted truth, and when I'm talking through gritted truth, that's just, I'm over the top here, that's when JD says he gets a little frightened, he thinks I'm dangerous at that point, and that's true. But talk in the low voice. In our family, when I was growing up, whoever was the loudest got heard. Because everybody sat down at the table and everybody talked at the same time. So that was, everybody talked, nobody listened. I think that was the way that was. And so it was difficult. And it seemed like the more emotion that I would get, the louder my voice would become. And JD would do things that would really not help that situation. He would say things like, why don't you tell the neighborhood? So I did. I walked out in the middle of the backyard and I said, "Attention, neighborhood! You know, attention, JD's a son of a bitch." You know, I'm yelling it out. Now JD's in the house. And I walk back in and I go, "Oh, because who looks like the ass here?" You know. JD's nowhere to be seen. I'm out there, you know. And JD had been sober about 5 years, and then my next door neighbor said to me, "Your husband doesn't drink anymore, does he?" And I said, "Well, not today." And she said, "Well, we haven't seen you out in the yard." You notice it wasn't we haven't seen JD laying out in the yard, you know, but they hadn't seen the bizarre behavior coming from me. You know, I was the one that would be sitting out in my front yard on my little bench, my front yard, in my nightgown, sobbing in the middle of the day. I wanted everybody to know I was in pain, but I was so horrified anybody would know. Now, I mean, that's the nuttiness of it, you know. The next thing is stick to the subject. Stick to the subject. And it's so tempting when you've got a whole list of stuff you haven't dealt with, when you go over the top to say, "And not only that, don't you, here's this, and here's this," and pretty soon, I mean, it's just every little nail in the coffin. Whip, 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 you know. You just nail them to it. Well, we had a funny little thing. Back when I was fighting the cat, and I had the pellet gun laying on the piano bench in the living room, JD, earlier in the day, got stung by several wasps. He was out there doing something around the house and excited a bunch of wasps. And so he came in and I said, "Here, let me give you some Benadryl." I forgot what common little things like Benadryl do to alcoholics. You don't get the reaction that you get with normal folk. To a lot of Benadryl and I just go, "Sleepy time," that's the end of it. JD took his Benadryl, went to the meeting, drank all the coffee, came back home mean. He was in a vicious, nasty, sarcastic mood. And I'm thinking, you know, if I went to a meeting and came like that, I don't think I'd go back, you know. I mean, it's got to be better than that. What in the hell's the matter? I wasn't thinking he's had that drug. I wasn't thinking. And he wasn't thinking either. He was just out of sorts. Now, I'm sitting in my recliner reading my book, and he's stomping around. He said, "I'm going to bed." And I'm thinking, good. You go to your bed before you get hurt here. And I'm saying to myself, don't say anything. Do not react. You haven't done anything. You know how you'll give yourself the little pep talk. Keep your mouth shut. And so we have these hanging beads in the doorway between the hall and our living room. And so I'm reading and all of a sudden I hear whip, 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 whip. And there's those beads slinging against the wall. And he's standing there in his underwear and he says, "Nah, nah, 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 nah." He starts taking my inventory. You know, he says, you did this, and you did this, or you don't do this, you know. And I just said to myself, don't say anything, just say, okay. And he didn't get the reaction that he wanted. He wanted to fight. I didn't want to fight. And he whips around and goes back through the beads into the bedroom, and I go, made it. Didn't have to say anything. Back to the book. Read the same sentence again. Here we go. I'm getting into whip, 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 go the beads. I look up, and another thing. And then here he goes, flip, 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 and goes, here's another little litany, and I'm, don't move, don't move, don't move. Okay. He turns around, goes back through the beads, and he's in there. Read that same sentence again now. We went through this 5 or 6 times. I had enough. I'd had enough. And so I said, God, if that sumbitch comes back here with another thing, I'm going to take that gun and I'm going to shoot his ass as he retreats, so help me. I got the gun, I pumped it up, and I set it by my chair. And God did for J.D. what he couldn't do for himself. He went to sleep. You know, there is a point that you just can't go beyond. And I had it that night. And I thought, you know, we got a step that takes care of you. You can make an amends, go on, you know, and just shoot him. You know, I'd had all I could stand, you know. The next guideline is don't try to work the other person's program or tell them how. Oh, that is so difficult sometimes. That is so difficult. I watched J.D. and our next door neighbor for about a year and a half. And J.D. yelled at the next door neighbor's grandson who was mowing his yard. And the kid quit. Now, the kid's in his 20s. Next door neighbor's 97. And a very, very sweet man. He's been a wonderful neighbor to us all these years. And J.D. understood John Henry to say that his grandson would not come over and visit with him because J.D. had yelled at him. And so he thought John Henry was mad at him. And so when J.D. thinks somebody's mad at him, he stays away from that person. You know. And so he had mentioned this time, and I just try to keep my mouth shut and let that go. Let it go. Don't try to tell him how to do it. Know how to do it. And one morning he was over at Wood Street, and he was talking to his sponsor. And so he was telling me about that coming home, and I'm thinking, well, it's about time. It's about time. And so later that day, I am taking some debris out to the front of our property there, and John Henry comes out to the front of his, and he motions to me, and he says, I think J.D.'s mad at me. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, you know, J.D. avoids me and he won't talk to me. And he said, if I've done anything, I don't know what. And I said, I think you and J.D. need to talk about this. You know, I said, I'm out of it, you know. And John Henry said, and I said, I'm not mad at you, John Henry. I don't have any problem. I said, God, you've been a great neighbor. So I take my little wagon back to the back, and I told J.D. he was out there in the back. I said, John Henry wants to talk about that. About that time he came out of the back door, and he looked our way, and I said, why don't you talk? And then just let that go, you know. And did you know they resolved in 10 minutes a situation that had been going for a year and a half. He was not mad at J.D. He agreed the kid shouldn't have thrown the grass on the yard. And what he had said was that his grandson didn't like to come over to his house and visit him because he didn't like to do stuff. It didn't have anything to do. And there was the misunderstanding, you know, that had gone on all that period of time, you know. But it's hard to stay out of that other person's thing. And that's like J.D. will see me sometimes do stuff. And it's really hard, you know. And I know that he's reached his limit when he'll say, don't you think you ought to call your sponsor? Now, when he says that, I don't ever want to call my sponsor now. You know, because don't you tell me to call my sponsor. Who are you to tell me to call my sponsor? He's right. I know he's right. But I don't want to do it because he told me to do it. So it means I have to sneak to do it. You know, I don't want him to know. Okay, the next guideline is listen to the other person's complaints. Don't make demands is the last. You know, so many times we don't want to listen to what the other person has to say because while they're saying theirs, you're doing rebuttal in your head. Don't do that. Listen. Give them your undivided attention. Sometimes they have valid comments to make. You know, and then don't make demands. Those ultimatums, don't back yourself into a corner with an ultimatum that you aren't going to be able to live with in the long run. Because then it's real hard to back down from those positions once you have taken those. All right. After God, our personal recovery comes first before our partner. You know, I have to come first. My relationship with God and working my program, going to my meetings, and doing what I need to do for me. Because if I don't do those things, I'm not going to be a decent partner over here. I'm going to be more than a partner. I'm going to be a boss. I'm going to be in charge because that's my nature. I'm going to be dominating. I'm going to be that way unless I have what I need to do for me in my life. And then we had to learn to get rid of the untouchables. Now, the untouchables, those are those subjects that every time you try to talk about them, we hit a nerve. Everybody's got them. You know, one of them was his family. One of them was my family. You know, I can say anything I want to about my family. He can say everything he wants to about his family, but God forbid I should make a remark about his asshole brother. You know. You know. And he's got 3 brothers, you know. So you'll wonder which one I'm talking about. Now, No, but I mean, that was the thing, we could not talk about that. We would get, even though he knew I was right or I knew he was right about a comment, it's like, don't say that about them. It's like, I can say it, but don't you say it, And so that was some of the untouchables. And how we got rid of that, there were other areas in our life too, that we'd made a decision that when that time would come, when that untouchable, because what happened would be, we would get in a fight or you'd get your feelings hurt, and then you'd go back to your corners. And then later down the road, guess what? Here we're out in the middle of the ring. We're fighting again over the same thing. Nothing is resolved, and you go back to your corners. And so you have hurt that is piled upon hurt, time after time, until you have a big wound there, a big sore. And when somebody scratches that sore, man, you're at them. And I said, we've got to get those things resolved some way or another. So what we determined we would do is we sit down and we hold hands and we touch knee to knee, face to face. And we sit there and we hold hands and we talk it out without letting go of the hands, looking at each other and working out. And we continue to sit there until we have resolved it. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. Sometimes it takes a few hours. But we resolve it to the point that we're going to resolve it before we get up from here, and it's not going to be a deal anymore. And that's hard. It takes a lot of prayer and what have you. And we pray about it and say, it's time. Let's do that. And now we can do those things that were such bad buttons for us for a long time. We don't have that anymore in that area. But every once in a while, something else will crop up. But see, we have tools now. We know how to handle that. Honesty and trust must be observed. I can't trust him if I can't believe him. That's the thing. And trust is such a fragile thing, because you get lied to about one thing, and then all of a sudden you don't believe anything. It breaks the trust. And trust is hard to rebuild. And the thing of it is, it may be a lie of omission. It may be something that you never mentioned. And why did you not mention it? He hates confrontation. He hates confrontation. So he will just glide on like it doesn't happen rather than have confrontation. And what happens on the other end, trust me, you're going to have confrontation. Because it's going to come, as my mama used to say, that sooner or later the truth will arrive, And when it does, then you're going to be mad because he didn't say anything for a long time. He didn't trust you not to have a fit. That's what, in our case it was. He said, I was afraid we'd be having what we're having right now. But see, his fear came upon him because he didn't handle it when he should have handled it. And now I am really mad because he didn't trust me. He didn't honor me. Those kind of things. So I've got all that now added into whatever the problem was. So the thing of it is, we found that it's better to be honest up front than have to deal with it on the other end. And that's like I say, that's the reason the water garden part of that was the fact that it seemed to me, he snuck behind my back and did it because he never mentioned it. See, that's that little omission, You tell me he didn't know he was going to dig a swimming pool? I don't think so. Okay. Try to work as a team wherever possible. A team works together. Have you ever seen a team of horses? If one's going one way and one's going the other, you're not going to get anywhere with what they're pulling. They have to work side by side. Side by side. And so that's what we try to do. And we have found that we can get a lot accomplished. If you don't believe it, you should have been at our place the last few months after the ice storm. We have taken tons of debris, it seems like, out to the front. And it was real funny. I got him for his birthday. I got him a little wagon. It's a steel wagon, garden wagon. It's got big rubber tires on it. And so we'd load it up and carry it out. And J.D. would cut, and I'd load and carry it out. And I made a mistake. I'm not an outdoors person, but I was trying to work as a team and help him because I knew it was such a mammoth job. One person would, it'd take him the rest of his life, for God's sake, if you could have seen our yard. And so we had the thing all loaded, and I was pulling it. Well, it pulls real easy on those rubber tires. And I saw another limb laying over here, and so I decided I'd bend down and pick up that limb, not thinking about that wagon having momentum. And it hit me, and it knocked me down and ran over me. I got ran over by a wagon. I couldn't believe it. You know, I told JD, I said, first of all, before I would have bent the wagon had it hit me. You know, but it did, and I was black and blue, but I was out there dying laughing. And he said, what is it? I said, I just got ran over by a little wagon. I can't believe I got ran over by a wagon. And he was over there. He says, are you okay? Are you okay? You know, but we care. We care about one another. Used to, let me tell you, this deal with the trees. In our yard, when we first moved there, we took out 7 trees. Neither one of us had a clue about how to do it. We're doing it in active alcoholism. It was not a teamwork effort. Trust me. You know, Paul Bunyan here had never had a chainsaw in his happy little hands, but he knew everything there was about cutting down a tree. And so we went out there, and I saw it, and I just couldn't believe it. He was up in the top of the tree, and he'd cut off all the limbs behind him as he went. And I said, don't you think it would have been better to start at the top and work down? And he said, well, that doesn't help much now. You know, that was one of the trees. Then he got this other one that was leaning over our house, and we tied this big rope around this section of the tree that was really leaning over that direction. And he said, here, honey, he said, you hang on to this rope while I cut it, and then you can pull it back this way to keep it from falling. And then he cut the tree off below the rope, the whole damn tree. And the tree's leaning, and I'm going, oh my God, I can't hold a whole tree, even as heavy as I cannot hold it. And I'm like this, and I'm screaming, help, help. And I had tied the rope around myself so I could get a big, you know, so I couldn't lose it. And so he throws the saw down, he runs and helps me, and he said, we'll rock it. Rock it? Hell, I can't stand up. And I'm pulling, and then all of a sudden the tree started coming, and I'm going, ah! But I was tied to it. And so I was running, and it never occurred to me to go to the side. I ran, and the tree fell on me out there in the yard, yeah. And the thing of it is, we had some recent rain, and if not, I would have been killed. I mean, I was pretty bruised up, but I mean, I would just swat over the tree. And the next door neighbors are dying laughing. They said they'd never seen anything quite like that. So you see, getting run over by the wagon wasn't a big deal. We've improved. I was able to walk away from that one. We have tried in the past to work as a team. But like I say, it just didn't, that's just like we had a metal storage building, and on that metal storage building, we were going to move it. And so there was 3 of us, JD and me and a girlfriend. And he said, I'll get on one side, because after you unbolt it and everything, you know, it's just a little metal storage building. It's not real heavy. It's sort of ungainly, you know, 8 by 10 building. But anyway, he says, I'll get over here, and then y'all get on either corner. So that means you have one on either corner and one in the middle, and it's going to go sort of whoopie whoop whoop. And so JD's walking backwards with the building, and Sarah and I are walking forward with the building, and all of a sudden the building don't want to go. And the building don't want to go. And I said, set the building down, Sarah. And I went to see what the problem was, because I can't get him to answer me. And I look as I go through the open doors of the building, and his body is under the building on one side, and his head's on the other side. And I go around there, and he's going, get it off, get it off. And I said, what happened? You know, the Al-Anon, I need to know what happened here. I said, what did you, get it off, get it off. I said, why didn't you say something? Get it off, get it off. I said, how in the world did that happen? How did you get under the building? Get it off, get it off. Well, I got tickled, and then I couldn't lift the building. I had to go and get the neighbors to come help get it off. And he had tripped when he was walking backwards, and he said it came so quick he never had a chance to say anything before it was on top of his throat. You know, that's not exactly teamwork. Another one of our guidelines is joint decisions regarding changes in the home or the yard. That one came up after the water garden, you know. Joint decisions. Things that we can decide on and agree on to go forth. So that we're working together as a unit as opposed to somebody wanting this way or that way. And you know, it's amazing, but when the two of us get together, and he's real creative, not real realistic sometimes, but he's extremely creative. But that's where, you know, it works well together, because I'll say, that is a really great idea. However, did you think about this and you think about that? Because like I say, I'm the one that goes way out here and he does the right here. And so then we can work together and maybe overcome some of those other things. Now, as far as the duties in the home, we made a list of the jobs and things necessary for the running of the home, and we decided who was going to do what. Now, I wrote down the things that I saw that need to be done that I was willing to do. And he did the same. Funny how those lists differ, even in length. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't on a list. You know, so what do you do there? You know, you've got the things that you like to do. He's got the things that he enjoys doing. But what do you do about all that other stuff? We take turns. We take turns. And you know, it's like, you can do it for a month, I can do it for a month. You know, we don't have to be locked in forever into something that you don't like doing or don't want to do. And over the years, this has changed many times because, like for instance, when I hurt my back, there were certain things that I couldn't do that I had been doing that JD just picked right up and went on. And vice versa, you know, we, like I say, we work that back and forth. And we don't have those major things. It's amazing to me how big an issue garbage has been in my life. You know, or the dirty clothes, or the dishes. You know, it's funny how you can make a major issue out of the garbage needs to go out when I think it needs to go out. But it's his job. He said, I will take out the garbage. Well, why don't you take out the garbage? I will when I'm ready to take out the garbage. So I start another sack, you know. And then you have 2 sacks, you know. And, but that's where the dogs came in handy. Because, you know, when you've got dogs, they have to do it a lot quicker. Because the dogs will get into the garbage if you don't, you know. But it was the idea that I kept nagging him about taking out the garbage. He would have taken it out sooner if I had just kept my mouth shut. But I couldn't do it. And so it was suggested that if it was bothering me that bad, for me to take it out and keep my mouth shut. You know? And so it's real funny now. It does not bother. It's whoever.
Happy birthday to me.
Yeah. Butch is off a garbage detail. I always feel like the spouse needs a little gift on the wife's special day, you know. But no, it's like it's not a big deal anymore. It's like when the garbage is full, whoever puts that piece in that makes it full, you know. I mean, we just take it out, you know, and it never bothers me. You know, but for a while I would say to him, package out on 3, please. You know, and he would laugh. That didn't bother him like you didn't take the garbage out again. You know, it was just the difference in the way that I was presenting the situation, you know. And as far as the laundry situation, you know, if you want clothes washed, they have to appear in the washroom. Clothes not making it to the washroom do not get washed. That's pretty simple, you know. If I'm out there, I don't mind loading the stuff in. If I'm out there, I don't mind bringing the stuff in and folding it. That doesn't. But I'm not going to go around and collect dirty clothes. You know, and I'm not going to go through pockets. You'd be surprised what I find in the washing machine from time to time. But I'm not going to go. We're both adults. I don't feel necessary to have to treat him like a child and go through the pockets. And he's the one that's going to have to buy the new washing machine. So, that's simple. And when one of us feels that the other is not adhering to the guidelines or duty responsibilities, we try to bring it up in a positive way, saying, I have a problem. Instead of, you're not doing, or you said you would, you know, just say, I have a problem. This is the problem. And the problem doesn't have your name in it. The problem is the garbage is bothering me, or the laundry is bothering me, or the key. We have this little joke about the key to the gates. We keep our gates locked. And I had a little bitty key ring with this gate key on it. Well, J.D. had put it in his pocket, and when he'd go out, instead of bringing it back in the house, and see, I'd always unlock the gate and go back and put the key up. No, he carries it with him all day, all week. I can't get in and out of the gates or anything. And so I was given a key to Alcatraz. It's about that big. It's real heavy and thick. So that's where the little gate key is now. So that solved that, because it weights him down. He knows it's there. Before he would say, I can't do anything. And our yard bed, I got tickled at him the other day, the pest control. He always goes in and gets the little key to open the gates to spray the yard. And he's looking and he's saying, where's the little key with the hot air balloons on it? And I said, oh, we have this other key now. And he goes, which one goes to the gate? That's the reason he's spraying for bugs. And when someone has a responsibility, let them do it in their own time and their own way. And the reason I say that is, and when I was growing up, my mother would come in and she would tell me to clean my room. But it wasn't my room, it was her house. Because it had to be the way she wanted it done. It was even, I never had a room that was called Mary Pearl's room. There was Bobby's room, and there was Dorothy's room, and there was Mom and Daddy's room, and Mary Pearl just went from one to one. And there was never a thing. And it was her house. I never felt like it was my room. So I think it's real important to allow people to have their own little space. Okay, tradition 10. A relationship should avoid heated controversy. No one wins in a heated controversy. You both lose, you both get hurt, and so will a relationship. Power-driven anger, resentment, closed-mindedness, revenge, violence, all can be part of that heated controversy. Now, when I got married the first time, I was told, don't ever go to bed mad. I don't guess I'd ever gotten any sleep if that was the case. Because I was mad all the time. Everything made me mad. It's the only feeling I could identify by the time I got to the program. If you hurt my feelings, it made me mad. If you disappointed me, it made me mad. If you did something that scared me, it made me mad. That was my first reaction to everything, is it made me mad. I was just angry, angry, angry. And, I learned revenge early on in my life, and it was like it was not a defect of character. It was a way of life. It never occurred to me it was something you shouldn't do, because it's like, that's what I saw. That's what I was raised with. That was normal. My mother's family, they were all alcoholic except Mama, and I think she probably needed a drink pretty bad. She was more neurotic than any of the alcoholics. And she had all these she was a rule and regulation person. You've got to do it exactly by the directions. You've got to do it by the rules. And so my daddy, I loved going with him, and he was pretty much a free spirit, and I enjoyed that. And we would go fishing and hunting a lot. And on a fishing trip, when I was 5 years old, Mama decided to ruin it, so she came with us. And because Mama couldn't have fun, she wouldn't let you have any either. For fishing to my mother was a job. You go out there and you have to catch fish. I mean, she controlled the whole boat. She would tell you when to move, where to move, how long to make your line, how to fix your cork. I mean, she was in charge of the fishing expedition. And so right off the bat, I caught a little fish. And see, you weren't allowed to do that either. Mother gets the first fish, the biggest fish, and the most fish. That's the rule. And I caught this little bitty fish. Well, there was a limit and a size regulation for this particular kind of fish. And so she looked at it and she immediately identified that it was not large enough to keep. Wasn't a keeper. So she very calmly ripped it off the hook and tossed my fish back in. Well, I'm 5 years old, for God's sakes, She threw in my fish. I'd caught my fish. That hurt my feelings. That pissed me off. And so I went into a screaming coma right there. I mean, I was mad. And Daddy told me, he said, honey, don't mind that. Don't mind that. He said, come back here in the back end of the boat with me. So I'm stomping back off to the back end of the boat. And as I get alongside of him, he said, don't worry, we'll get her. Well, I didn't know what that meant, but, it had sort of a good sound to it. It's like, intuitively, you're going to like this. And so, what happened was every time she'd catch a fish, she'd swing around to him, because he's babysitting now, and he would take the fish off her hook, and he would rebait her hook, she'd swing back around, and he'd hand me her fish, and I'd throw it back over. Every fish the old heifer caught, I threw back over. Now, that was just as normal as anything to me. And what it told me was, anytime anybody does anything that hurts you, do it back as many times as you can. Do it back. And that was how I lived all my life. That was how I lived, because I didn't see anything wrong with that. Nothing at all, JD and I had been together for many years before I realized I didn't even know things he liked or disliked. I had never paid attention that much. I was so self-centered. I thought that he liked everything like I liked it. It just never occurred to me, because, my way was always right. And so one day he came in and he said, I hate the way you fold my underwear. JD, I've been folding underwear like this for 9 years. Yeah, and I've hated it every day for 9 years. You've been folding the underwear. And I said, JD, I folded it this way my whole life. This is a military way. I roll stuff. I come from a military family, and I married a military man the first go around. And he said, I don't like it. When did you not like it? From the very beginning. Why didn't you say something about it? I didn't want to have the conversation we're having now. You see, it would never enter my mind to wait 9 years to tell somebody I didn't like the way they folded my underwear. I wouldn't hesitate in 2 seconds to tell somebody if I didn't like something. That was amazing to me. I'm thinking, dear God, now this is a man who can't stand in line, but he doesn't have to do confrontation with me for standing in line. And he didn't want to do the confrontation. Another thing I found out, I was going to the store one night, and I said to him, I'm going to go get us some ice cream, because when he first got sober, ice cream's a big deal. Still a big deal, isn't it? Anyway, and I said, anything special? He said, I'd like praline pecan, please. JD, why would you want praline pecan? He said, it's my favorite. You have never had praline. He said, no, you never buy praline pecan. You always get vanilla, but my favorite is praline pecan. I said, really? I didn't even know, because, I got vanilla and he ate vanilla. I thought he liked vanilla. I don't like praline pecan, so it wouldn't enter my mind. But I would have bought praline pecan if I'd had a clue he wanted it. I can always buy vanilla too, it's not a big deal. But see, that's the thing. I just always considered that what I had was, he would like it too. I find that we don't have to have so many wrongs or rights, but there's differences, and not to take things personally. Just because he doesn't like the way I fold his underwear, that's just a preference. That doesn't mean I'm doing things wrong. It's just not the way he would prefer it. And it's like in his lunches. JD tickles me. He eats food like some other people I know, and he sort of goes on a binge of one kind or another and eats it until you can't possibly stand to look at it, and then he goes to the next item, And so he came in one day and he said, I want a Twinkie in my lunch every day. And I said, okay. So 3 or 4 years later, he comes in and he said, I hate these damn Twinkies. Don't you ever put another Twinkie in my lunch. Now, he asked for Twinkies, and it's like, when did you get tired of the Twinkies? Well, after about the first 6 months. Well, why didn't you say I didn't want any more Twinkies? I'm ready to have cookies or whatever. And he said, I don't know. He said, I don't know. But that's funny, because he thought I'd take it personal that he didn't like Twinkies. I can give a crap if he likes Twinkies or not. I don't like Twinkies. It's his lunch, I don't care. But it's so funny because we're so used to the other person taking things personally that when we criticize or want to change an action, we have to give each other the right to have grown a little bit, not to become angry when someone asks you to do something different. And then, can God's voice be heard over mine? Because, you know, when you're angry, your voice, at least mine, like I say, gets louder and louder and louder. But can you hear God's voice over that? And I can't, when I'm screaming, hear God's voice. There's no way. Now, as a child, I lived in daily controversy with my mother. There was lots of violence, verbal and physical. The kitchen was not a safe place. When I was 14 years old, my mother she never threw away food. No matter if it was 2 tablespoons or 2 teaspoons. She put it in something and saved it. Because she had been hungry as a child, you never throw food away. And when we would have company for dinner, which would be my sister and her husband, because see, there's so many years difference. Dorothy was married when I was like 7 years old. And then my brother Bobby was married when I was like 4.5 years old. And my other brother was dead when I came along. There's such an age difference in the families there. And so Dorothy and her husband would come over and have supper with us. And Mother would do what I call emptying the refrigerator. And all these little dishes and stuff. Now, I hated washing dishes. I hated it. My mother, as we said, was short. I was tall. Mama's kitchen was built for Mama. It's too low. And so it would hurt the small of my back to have to bend so low to do those dishes all the time. And I hated it. And Mother would not listen to that. And it's real funny. My mother bitched about everything, but she didn't like other people bitching. You know, that's the way we are. And so this particular night, Dorothy and JR had come over for supper. And Dorothy was washing and I was drying and putting the dishes away. And I am bitching. Now my sister's playing a joke on me. I have not a clue. I'm a little kid. And what she's doing is I'm drying the dishes and I'm putting them over on the table till I get all of a certain thing and then putting it up. And she's going back and getting the clean dishes and rewashing them so they're coming back through. And I'm thinking, Mama has really cleaned out the refrigerator this time. You know, and I'm ning, 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 and Mama tells me to shut up. And I couldn't shut up. And so the next thing I know is I got hit with a 3-quart Pyrex mixing bowl over the head. Now, the bowl broke in half, cut my scalp, blood's running down over my face. At the same moment, my sister puts the utensils into the dish drainer, and on top was a butcher knife. And I grabbed the butcher knife, and I turned around, and I cut my mother all the way down her arm. I just laid her wide open. Well, we both had to go to the hospital and get sewn up that night. Now, you know, when you live in that kind of violence, you know, and the thing of it is, I no more thought, a conscious thought of I'm going to chop Mama up. That was a self-defense thing. But I was bad because I had done it. She was not bad for hitting me because, you see, in that day, you owned your children. You brought them in this world, you could take them out, you know. And today, I know Mother would have been arrested for child abuse, but also know I would have been arrested too, you know, for the things that I did. But when you live in that, the violence, it just seems to be part of it as you grow up. And so violence is not a big deal. That's like when the violence came in our home, it was from me toward J.D. It wasn't a big deal because that was sort of a normal way. When you couldn't deal with your anger, that was the way we dealt with it, through the violence. And it works like you get angry and you don't know how to deal with the anger, and the anger builds, and then you have that lasting resentment, and then the rage comes, and then the next thing you know, the violence is upon you. And it happens so quickly, and it's like you just never know when you're going to go over that edge. But if you handle the stuff as it's going one at a time, that can all be taken care of. But it's not handling that anger and allowing it to build, which makes it really, really dangerous. And you see, that last time I went over to my mother's, when she called for that mother-daughter talk, and I went over there that day, she wanted, Mother's mind had gone, and she was thinking I was stealing, and J.D. was trying to murder her, and she was just into this. It wasn't anything we haven't thought about, but, you know. But we had reconciled, you know. But Mother's mind went, and she said that she wanted some items that I had never seen, had no idea what she was talking about. And I said, Mama, I've never seen these things. And she said, I have gone to the prosecuting attorney, which she had, and I have a warrant sworn out for your arrest, which she had, and you have until tomorrow morning to produce these things. How can you produce what you don't have? I had no idea what she was talking about. And I told her that. And we were in the kitchen, and my mother was a dressmaker, and her kitchen cutting table was what she used as her cutting table. And she had this big pair of scissors there on that cutting table. And as she began to talk to me, I could see she was getting that weird look like she used to get. And she picked up those scissors. And she began to walk with those scissors around. And I began to circle the table, and she got more aggressive. And the door to the back opened in, so the door was against my back. And I began to get very afraid, and she told me, she says, I'm going to kill you. And she raised those scissors up, and she's coming at me, and I grabbed her, and I'm trying to hold her back. And you know, people, when they're like that, are very, very strong. And I was terrified, and it was right back like being a kid again. You know, it's sort of like a flashback to that violence. Only this time, I realized I could hurt her, because the self-defense in me wanted to hurt her. And I got to get out of here. And so I grabbed her by the shoulders, and I shook her, and I said, get away from me. And I mean it right now. And it startled her. And she backed up a little, and when she did, I was able to get that door and slip out. And she chased me down the driveway trying to stab me with the scissors. And that was the last time that I was able to be around my mother, because she had gone completely over the edge until she had a massive stroke. And then somehow all that went away, and Dorothy became the bad kid, and I was the good kid. Who knows, you know. Mental illness is a very strange thing. But I remember that, you know, those feelings were still inside. Do you know the difference between a problem or an incident? What you do is you can have an incident and not have a problem. It never occurred to me. My TV plumped out on me. It was a couple of weeks before Christmas one year, and the TV repairman came in, and he pronounced it dead on arrival. And I said, that's all I need here right at Christmas, having to replace a television. Geez, I didn't need another problem to have to deal with. And he said, this is a problem? He said, I'd call this an incident. He said, a problem to me is sort of life-threatening. You really hate it when earth people have all this stuff. I said, are you in a 12-step program? I'm hoping, you know. He said, no, what's that? Forget it, you know. But the thing about it is, it's not a problem till you put the word problem on it in your mind. There's a lot of things that are uncomfortable or incidents or something to deal with, but they're not problems, because when I put the word problem on it, I make it bigger. It has more power over my mind. It has more power to make me weird. Now, holding grudges, you know, they're really heavy. My sister, we were traveling across the United States in 1992. We were in the same car together for a month. About 3 weeks too long, but being locked in a car together. Dorothy was telling me, she says, you know, Bobby hurt my feelings when I was 16, and I'm never going to forgive him. I said, Dorothy, what in the world did he do? And she said, well, he teased her and made fun of her in front of a boy that she was sweet on. And it embarrassed her. And she said, I'll never forgive him. I said, you think it's worrying him too much? Bobby was killed in 1951 in the Korean War. This is 1992. Dorothy is still carrying that. And you know, one of the neat things about Dorothy's mental condition now, she can't remember it. She's finally let it go, or it's gone somewhere, you know. But I told her, I said, I can't believe that you're still carrying something that long. And so she got some kind of mileage out of that, you know. And I thought, dear Lord in heaven. A lot of the problems in our home have resulted because of poor communication. Poor communication. Especially when the other person has a hearing loss or an attention deficit. So many times, J.D. will say to me, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Well, that's because of his hearing loss. He doesn't want to say, I'm sorry, I can't hear, you know. But it got to the point where that was a little button with me. I got really tired of hearing, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. And so back during the ice storm, here we are going for days and nights without heat and without power, and I'm cold and I'm hungry and all this kind of stuff. And we get out finally, and we go to a little neighborhood restaurant, and we're sitting in there, and he says, "Look, isn't it wonderful? It's snowing." No, it is not wonderful. And so JD's, touch tone with humanity is a trip to Walmart. And so he said, before we go home, we must go to Walmart and get food for the birds. I haven't had anything to eat, but God, we got to take care of the birds, And so we go in there, and they've got these 25-pound sacks of bird seed. And so he lifts this one up, and he sets it in the cart, and I said, if you turn it upside down, then the barcode will be up, and you won't have to double handle it out at the checkout. And he gets the next sack and sets it in exactly the same way. And I just look and say, oh, okay. And now he goes to the third sack and he says, if I was to turn this upside down, the barcode would be up and then I wouldn't have to double handle this thing at the checkout. I said, really? I said, what do you think I've been trying to say to you? And what does he say? I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I've been locked up too long in that house. I went, ah! I ran around the front of the cart. I grabbed him by the throat, and I'm swinging him back and forth, and his eyes are like this, And I look at him, and I hear this girl in the background, this black girl. She's saying, "Go, girl, get him," And I got to laughing, and I sat down on the bird seat there in Walmart and fell apart laughing. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd had a laugh like that. With all of the stress and the tension of the year that I'd had, it's like a lot of the joy had gone out of my life. And I told him, he said, we didn't get you out of there a minute too soon, did we? I'm going, no, I guess not. And I get Then there's sometimes when JD comes home, everything I'm doing is wrong. You are fixing the wrong food for supper. You're not fixing supper. You are doing, it's like anything and everything is wrong. I have learned there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. There's something bothering him that he's not dealing with. And if I can not buy into that and not have to be defensive and take it all personally and thinking that everything I'm doing is wrong and then feel sorry for me and look what he's doing, if I can keep out of that, sooner or later, usually, give it some time, maybe before the end of the night, I'll say to him, JD, what's really bothering you here? And he'll say, 9 times out of 10, something on the job has bothered him, and he has brought those feelings home, and he's angry on the job, and he can't take the anger out there, so it seems like it's a safe place to come home with it, And it is the safe place for him to vent. However, I would prefer him to come in and say, would you allow me to scream and yell and be bitchy about my job for a few minutes instead of finding everything? But I know, like I say, if I'm in a good place, when after the second or third thing it'll hit me, it's not these things. Don't try to defend anything. That's just where he is. Because when I get into that defensive posture, then that is what makes the controversy between us. I've learned, too, to disagree agreeably. Give him the right to have his own opinion about that. That's fine. But I believe it's this way, or what have you, And it's not that big a deal.